This is Critical Talk with Professor Amina Al-D, and I am honored to have with me this evening Muhammad Tausif Akbar, who is a native Chicagoan. I don't know who would own up to that, but he studied the foundational disciplines of Islam in Cairo, Egypt, and on his return to the United States, he received a BA in English and with a concentration in creative writing, which is what we're going to talk a little bit about today, from North Park University, and an MA in Islamic Studies, specializing in theology from the American Islamic College. He currently works as the research director for the Council on American Islamic Relations, and he's the chaplain in residence at Georgetown University. Welcome, my salams.
Walaikum salam. Such an honor to be here. Thank you so much, Dr.
No,
Adeen.
thank you. I read, I talked to you a little bit earlier, this article that you wrote for the Chicago Monitor. And I have to say, I was ticked a little bit at you because it wasn't 4 times longer, and excited by what you had decided to tackle.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, I found myself constrained by the word limit. Apparently, I was told people do not read more than 1,000 words.
No, that's a lie. People, if it's good, people keep reading, which is why I'm going to engage you in writing longer pieces. But they do that because of their space in the newspaper, not because people don't read more than 1,000 words. If you can't read more than 1,000 words, you don't read it anyway. But there you had several really interesting issues in this article, which looks primarily across three uh, comedians slash, I don't want to call, I'll say cultural commentators, social commentators, Rami, Hassan Minhaj, and Dave Chappelle. Three very different people doing three very different things. So let's not start with the sex. So I'll X out Rami for number one. And let's go up the middle. Hassan Minhaj. Have you watched him?
I have watched some of his stand-up. I recall him from his days on Jon Stewart's Daily Show.
Okay, so
and yeah, so when he started with the Daily Show, it was like, oh wow, here is someone who's clearly Muslim, at least with a Muslim name, Hassan Minhaj. Daily Show is something that I watched pretty regularly back when Jon Stewart was on. I can't say that my interest has continued to the same level with Trevor having taken over, but yeah, so I was watching him on there, and I thought he did really well on that show, and I was happy for him when he got the Patriot Act on Netflix. And
tell our audience what he was doing on that show. Was it the same kind of thing we see with Patriot Act, or was it different?
Yeah, on the Daily Show, he was one of the correspondents, and so how Jon Stewart had his various correspondents and experts, Hassan Minhaj kind of filled the role of the Muslim expert, or the expert about those affairs, and a correspondent. And so he would go and have very interesting and hilarious interviews with people, who are in the Republican Party, and he would ask them questions, and they wouldn't even know if he was a real journalist or not. He was, and in a strange way, he did the thing that Jon Stewart did, that blueprint of the unaware interviewee, asking them questions that exposed a little bit about what they're about, in terms of, and he would do that with people who were racist, Islamophobes, or who were supporting such legislation and ideas, and he would just make them look really silly, and everyone would laugh, and it was pretty funny. I can't recall one in particular, but because it was so long ago, he hasn't been on there for a number of years. But it did also show kind of a great, Jon Stewart giving chances to people and opportunities. So
Yes.
that was really lovely too.
Well, I think we need to step back for a moment and think about the genre of the crazy box. You know, there's comedy,
Mm,
there are dramas, there are different kinds of dramas, there are documentaries, there are foreign films. There's now several different kinds of animation that folk can tune into. And it seems to me that one kind of uh, one that has staying power is the really good social commentator that you're
hmm.
talking about who can sneak up on people and get them to say stuff that they wouldn't ordinarily say if they were on CNN or
Right.
MSNBC. And then those very few people who, like Jon Stewart, will invite new talent,
Hmm.
you know, to give that different perspective that we kind of all wish for. But then you, in this article, we'll come back to it with each of the people, talk about representation. Here you got Hassan Minhaj. He is a pencil, wears very stylish Old Navy. I don't know if it's Old Navy, who took the brand away clothes,
Hmm.
huge eyes,
Hmm.
right, which are very, very expressive, and he's got a potty mouth.
Right.
So you're not quite sure how all that fits together. And he's arguably Muslim. He's telling you he's Muslim, even though his wife is Hindu, and that's a
Hmm.
different story. But he's breaking down some kinds of representation, um, and also perhaps some identity labels. What do you think?
No, I think I would agree with all of that. Absolutely. Because he came onto the scene and his first, the way he got onto Jon Stewart was interesting. So that's one thing I remember.
Oh, tell me
And
about it.
it had to do with, I guess there was a call for, he was rejected the first time, I believe, but the second time he sent a video of him doing a bit on Bill Maher, who, as we know, Bill Maher in the
I do.
real time,
I
he
would watch
is,
the show. I do. Yeah,
yes.
I
I've
do.
watched a lot of Bill Maher real time, and even in my job at Care Chicago, we've
Mhm,
done reports on the way Muslims are represented on that show. And
mhm.
Bill Maher, he comes from a place of this general kind of liberal WASP, very old school kind of Archie Bunker mentality when it comes to Islam and Muslims. But he tries to come across as I'm keeping it real, about Islam. And in reality, he knows very little about Islam. And he always has individuals on who speak out against Islam, but he doesn't have people who are Muslims themselves who can represent and stand on the religion or
Yeah.
speak about things intelligently, right? And to me, that's almost the blueprint of people who are in the Islamophobia industry. And apparently, what Hassan Minhaj did is he sent a video to Bill Maher, who really loved it. He loved the way he critiqued um, Bill Maher, and they had him on. He got the job, and so from there, I think he's built his career on this identity as a Muslim American,
So
and so
when you say stand on Islam, what do you mean?
yeah, that's a yeah. So what I mean by that is not necessarily just theologically committed, but I think that's part of it because there's rarely anyone who comes from a committed perspective onto the Bill Maher show who is a committed Muslim in the sense of I believe in La ilaha illallah, like yourself, Dr. Adine, who's an expert who's been in the community for so many years and could
But
speak to
I've
the
been on this
nuances.
show, and it is hell.
Exactly.
Hmm, hmm.
And it's doing such a disservice, right? It does such a disservice to the knowledge of Islam and Muslims, and it furthers these narratives that are really detrimental for the most part. And
how do that when to any Muslim is a cultural representation, and they can only speak, generally speaking, for their cultural seeking. Not all the Muslims in the world. So how you mean? I'm not sure what you mean, but are you talking about um, how we uh, do some things to talk about our diversity? Because we have diversity of opinions, background, seatings, cultural takes, food, name it. We
sure,
got a huge diversity.
yeah, I think just a slice of that diversity on that show would have been a great thing.
Would have
Because,
been good, huh?
for instance, when he was talking about Syrian refugees, and he was sounding like Donald Trump during that whole time period leading up to the election of Trump, he never once had someone who was a Syrian Muslim on that show, but he felt so comfortable generalizing,
Yeah.
reducing them to these stereotypes of, oh, we're going to be inundated. There may be ISIS sympathizers amongst them. And so pushing the line of Trump.
Serious?
Yeah, I can share you the research we did on that topic for sure. And I think you would
My
find it really
goodness.
interesting. But someone like Hassan Minhaj is interesting because I, I feel comfortable saying I don't think he has the tools to intellectually necessarily engage on that level. Um, but he is someone who can provide a comedic take and satirize it in an intelligent way for sure. That I think that's his modicum and his mode of doing it. But like recently, he has really upset the community. I don't know if you saw in terms of
Oh, about it.
his interview of Keith Ellison, where he made a dua, and in that dua,
A short prayer. I'm
a
saying.
short prayer.
Uh,
Apologies, right? Yes, a short prayer in which he essentially mocked the prayer. It was like a mocking prayer, and it was
this is
very.
on TV. How
This
come
is
that? Oh,
this is on YouTube, I believe. I think this could be found on YouTube, but it's kind of a hot topic right now because it just came out a few days ago.
oh. How do
Yeah.
you mean mock the making? Keep telling the story. I'm just so intrigued that I'm beside myself. Go ahead.
So yeah, he in that interview he talks with Keith Ellison, but then he does this dua, which was very strange and cringeworthy because we know the purpose of dua is or short prayer. You know, when we raise our hands and we call on God to for whatever reason, right? But when we do it as a community, we're doing it, you know, to ask for help from oppression or to help in whatever it may be. And he did it almost mockingly, in not a sincere fashion, it appeared, you know, and he
So
was,
how do you mean?
yeah,
Do it.
I I mean, there was something in there. What did he say? I'm trying to recall. You know, sorry, my memory is a little short-term memory.
You are kind of old.
Yeah, but it's something to return to. I think if our audience goes back to it, they'll see what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask my producers to go look on YouTube real quick and see if you can find it. And so, what about it was he mocking?
Well, he wasn't. It was the form and the purpose of the dua. It seemed almost, and he called Allah the guy in the sky, or like the man upstairs, which you know that's not appropriate to most you know knowledgeable Muslims of how you do a prayer. You know that's
But
just
he's not talking to Muslims, is he?
um. I think in part also, but yeah, he's talking to more than Muslims for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, because his audience is much bigger than just a small sliver of Muslims.
Mm. Well, one of the things, if you notice in this country, is like Jesus gets, yeah, they beat up on Jesus, poor man,
Hmm.
forever. Muhammad has had his share. There is a kind of loose and familiar talk about God.
Yeah.
Is that the standard? I mean, what is the standard? Everybody should talk. I mean, what should they do?
Well, for someone who's built his career, I think, on that Muslim identity, it does raise questions of. I can understand someone who clearly has never really used that identity to build themselves up or to create a niche for
Mm.
themselves, being irreverent. I can understand that. I can see that, and I know that's in the great tradition of American comedy and satire and so forth.
Well, wait a minute.
But
I think I got it. I gotta see. You see, you should not have wet
okay,
my right. Okay. Like, can you cue that up for me, please?
yes, yes. Oh, so he can play for you right now?
Hey, we're on live streaming, ultra technological
This is really technological. Oh
space.
wow. Okay, let's check this out.
I'll lead it, and then white people, you guys can also play too. So, you know, Brandon, Cody, Cole, just you guys just
Turn it up.
Ready? Here we go. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Let's do a short one. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Oh Allah, please unite us all in the cause for justice. Oh Allah, please protect Brother Keith Ellison. He is fighting the good fight, and this is a fight for justice. Ya Allah, please protect us from plaque, gum disease, and gingivitis. Oh Allah, you know how when you're on FaceTime audio, and then it drops and it switches you to LTE, but then LTE also sucks. Ya Allah, please make LTE strong and better. You know how when you bite into an olive and there's still a pit in it, Allah. Allah, please protect us from the pit. Ya Allah, please bring back limited edition wasabi Doritos. They were really good. Allah, please. Ya Allah, please protect us from white women in yoga pants. Astaghfirullah, please. Ya Allah, please help Brother Keith Ellison prosecute these 4 police officers to the fullest extent possible. I mean.
Did you see the reaction on Keith Ellison's face?
He's
having a ball.
You think he was having a ball? He looked a bit. He looked like he was blushing.
Well, he's doing that, but he's having. Trust me, it's a black ball. He's having a ball. Because he's trying. He understands. I know Keith. He's understanding the comedic force. He's understanding that unlike formal prayers, you know, the salah that we make 5 times a day, the dua is what I call the begging prayer. Save me from this, give me that. You know, it's the begging prayer. You know, where the focus is on God only insofar as what God can do for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Hassan has thrown everything in there but the kitchen sink, you know, and you hear this riff at the beginning of Arabic that's so fast you can't catch it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't even know if he's made a mistake in the Arabic. And then he adds on the begging part, right? And then at the end, there's the social justice part. Now, let's have some issues with that.
Mm.
How far does, and I can't speak about his spiritual seating, but what? If you watch Prosperity Gospel TV, Christian ministers do that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's God loves you if you got some money. God loves you and you're going to get some money.
Mm-hmm.
He's not too cool with you if you're poor, broke down, and you don't have any money. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Are we sometimes perhaps drifting that way? You think for the as they say in Rami, the Muslim, that is this an issue, or is it an issue for everybody at all space and time? What bothered you?
You know, I see the comedy in that as well. I see that probably Hassan's, and it's not my job also to judge someone's sincerity that's in their heart and so forth, but he's clearly not sincere about that. So he's making a joke when he says, Allah protect us from the pit in the date, or, what have you. But, it does desacralize what is a very sacred aspect of the religion. I think that is what's
that's a sacred aspect of the religion.
Prayer.
I'm messing with you.
Sorry?
Don't get upset. I'm messing with you.
Okay.
Du'as become a sacred aspect of the religion.
When did they become a sacred aspect of the religion? Du'as, probably since the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
So if I met a Muslim in the backwater of Australia who had never heard of it, then he or she is missing a sacred aspect of the religion?
If they don't know what it is?
Mm-hmm.
No, they wouldn't. They just wouldn't have been informed of it or knowledgeable of it. It doesn't mean that, but Hassan is different. Hassan, he knows what a dua is, right? So for me, what bothered me kind of was this real desacralizing of it. It did bother me a little bit, though I understand what he was trying to do. And I'm not trying to be self-righteous and to say that he's just like a goofball.
When somebody comes forth with that, we need to ask questions about what are we doing here? I mean, nobody dances a jig at mass, although I'm sure some people might like to, but they don't.
Right.
So we take portions that translate across ethnic groups and do something different with them, then do we need to kind of have something else to say? Do we need to kind of forewarn? I don't know what he said to keep before he got to his dua, but it's an interesting little piece, because he ends it with the piece on social justice.
And that's where he changed his. Did you notice he changed his demeanor and his?
Exactly. Yeah. Totally. Right.
He seemed serious for a second. He seemed serious. He was serious in that moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how will you help me and the audience understand that? What's going on here? What is going on here?
I would tell the audience that, look, I understand what Minhaj is doing here. I understand that he's not just speaking to Muslims. He's speaking to a wide audience who don't know what Muslim prayer may be like, who have little familiarity with it. And so he, like you said, some unintelligible Arabic really quickly was recited. Sticklers, though, of course, when they hear that one dua, which was Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana, that is from the Quran. So, as Muslims, how serious that's taken. And it seemed like he said that in a mocking tone, which, I also don't want to be hard on him because I understand what he was doing. He was setting up.
Muslims themselves say that so quickly that you don't know what they're saying.
They say it quickly. I've grown up my whole life in going to a lot of Desi masajid and mosques, right? Like Indo-Pak mosques, where first of all, most people don't know what is being recited, and then the recitation is super quick. It's like, it is like that. But the tone is not.
It's the tone.
It's the tone. Yeah.
So when we're watching stuff, we're looking at the person, we're listening to the tone, and we're also trying to hear what it is that's being said. So we got 3 dimensions going, at least 3 going on here. Okay, keep going.
And so he was setting up that final dua with this kind of lighthearted, unfortunately, it hasn't gone over well with Muslims. And for me, it also like kind of struck me weird, you know. But he was doing that for a broader audience, and he set it up to get to the serious part because he's also a comedian and he's also someone who does satire, and he wanted to drive that home.
How long is this whole piece? It's not just the dua. How long is the whole piece?
I think it's something like 15 or 18 minutes long.
Okay.
Oh, Abdul Wahid said it's 30.
So when I watch his shows, I've seen him take on some American sacred cows, taxes, electoral politics, things about housing. And he's actually giving a very wide-ranging audience information they couldn't have gotten anywhere else. I mean, it's actual information. You know, don't use TurboTax because this is what TurboTax has done. You know, why don't we have a ranking votes? You know, all of these various things which have become the talk of the town in a lot of different areas because people didn't know. So here is a Muslim giving other Americans information they would not have had.
Yes, I agree. I think that aspect of the Patriot Act, absolutely, we can connect with. And they may be sacred cows, but they don't touch on religion.
But how can Muslims in America have the only religion that you can't touch?
We can't. We have to realize that, and it has been going on for the past, especially since 9/11, where, you know, Islam is being mocked. Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is being mocked. But I mean, I think we can respond. We can respond with our own art. We can respond with our relationships with people and responded to that because I think most Muslims know that this is going to happen here in America. But when you see another person,
think they really know.
You don't think so?
No, I think they're hoping it doesn't.
No, I think you're right. I think they hope it doesn't, but I think they know it's there. I don't think it's a shock in the sense of like, oh, I can't believe that this has actually happened. But it is upsetting to Muslims. Like I just even on the street, you know, where a street preacher may accost a Muslim. I saw this with my own eyes here in Chicago. Someone said something about Muhammad and the hands flew. You know, so it is hard for people to take that because they don't see it just as on the individual, but upon themselves. You're not just mocking Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, but which of course in itself is a sacred cow amongst Muslims, you know, lack of better words, but it's an attack on you. They take it personally, you know, because of also the relationship with Prophet that a lot of Muslims have, right? So, but when you see a Muslim engaging in that kind of mockery and kind of validating it, that is, I think, you know, a different story and becomes like, hey, you're supposed to be representing us. You're supposed to be familiar with.
Which us is he representing?
I think
those that want to knock down some of the sacred cows that are actually not a part of the religion, but are so much a part of particular cultures that people want to make their part of the religion. Which sacred cows?
Yeah, I mean, to say that there's one sacred cow may not be, you know, something uniform.
Come on. Don't get thoughtful.
Uniform. No, I don't think it's uniform across all the various ethnic cultures. But there's some things that do unite us as Muslims. Absolutely. You know, there are some things. If we are Muslims, this is where we come to the conversation about culturally or ethnically Muslim versus a practicing Muslim or someone who, for all their flaws, is committed to a certain spiritual legacy and a theological.
Perhaps. Well, let's move on to your guy and my guy, Mr. Rami.
Oh, yes.
God.
What did you think about the show?
I turned it on. He looked like 2 or 3 students I've had over the years, and I'm saying, "Oh no, not this crew again." Um, but the beginning, the opening scene in episode 1, where he's talking with his mom, and mom, of course, wants him to get married, and let's go in the masjid and find a girl. And he said, "No, the masjid is for prayer. You don't go in there trying to push a line." And I said, interesting. But then the first thing that comes up, which is purely no, it's not purely cultural. It resides in some Muslim cultures. Is that wudu, the washing and the preparation for the salat, the prayer, is more important than the prayer itself.
Yeah.
I thought that was excellent.
I had a little bit of a different take on that.
Go ahead.
I agree with you that that's an important point to make. We've all come across, I think, in our, if you're going to the masjid, if you're involved with Muslim spaces, people who are so stringent and rigid on rituals. Mm-hmm. But I also think, because I've only seen the first episode, how I was just talking about this with a friend right before we got on the show, is, I don't know if it hit that point with me, because that's how Islam is always presented, it seems like, is that, here is this legalistic faith that, is so interested, and how much, like, I think we recognize that there's a kernel of truth to the way some people practice it. But I was a little disappointed in how, I don't know, stereotypical it was in the way it was presented. I don't know.
But every stereotype has a kernel of the truth. Right?
No, it does. It does. It does. Yeah. It seems it's so exaggerated though. Like, and I understand that's the license.
Song, dude. And for those of you who haven't watched on Hulu, Rami is, I think it's listed on the comedies, right? Rami,
comedy drama.
Yeah. I think it's in its 2nd season. I would suggest that you really get comfortable before you watch it. I was about to run out the room, but then again, that's a different issue. But for me, much of that first episode was a kind of undressing. If I undress and I let you know that this Muslim who wants to present him or herself as pious, and we're all just animals. With I don't know, some religious musings. That's what I got. And I will go back because I was talking to younger friends, who African American and not, who loved it.
A lot of my friends love it as well, and I've only seen the first episode, and my reaction is similar to yours in many ways. Like, there were moments where it's discomfort with the way he presented the things. I'm not saying I want to see some sort of hokey 7-7 show about Islam. Like, we had Little Mosque on the Prairie, right?
Right.
And I also understand that every Muslim has.
Oh, that's another thing. I'm glad you mentioned that. For those in our audience who haven't seen it, I think it's still available, Little Mosque on the Prairie, which tackles some larger issues. I'm trying to think. I have the whole case of videos because I was using it in a class. Tackles some larger issues. It's comedic, a little slapstick comedic to me, but what can I say?
It's a little corny, but it's it's the Seventh Heaven kind of style of. I enjoyed watching it. It was hokey though, and I understood what it was. I appreciated it for what it was, but with Rami in that first episode, my take is, when I step back, beside my discomfort with a few of the scenes and how they made the Muslim girl look like such a freak and some of these other things, was, how much of that is pandering to what an audience wants to see, and how much of that is real, because sex sells. And that was part of my article as well, is that I appreciate representation, and I know we need representation. And what I was specifically saying in that was, you know, we're talking about Rami. Rami is about immigrant first generation representation, at least the first season, it seems, from what I gather. And then there's the character with Mahershala Ali, who's the Imam.
What episode is that?
That's the second season.
Yeah, but which episode?
I think it begins from the first episode of the second season.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's going to be an interesting dynamic to see between the African American sheikh and first generation immigrant Muslim, and how that evolves.
How do we?
But I was just going to say one last thing about the show and my reaction is that as Muslims, and nobody wants to say this out there, airing your dirty laundry, but we watch everything under the sun here in America. We watch everything from Game of Thrones to, you know, what have you, basketball, XYZ. But everybody wants to act like they don't, they really don't. But these conversations happen, and I think Rami absolutely has the right to talk about that. I think again, the three dimensions you mentioned, that is going to be important. Like, what's the tone? What's the content? What's the style? You know, that he brings this to us. So there were some issues I had and discomfort. I definitely had questions. I had, like, you know, what is this really about? And then that relationship with the Jewish white girlfriend.
Right. But she's only culturally Jewish.
Yes, and she thought he was only culturally Muslim. Yeah, exactly.
And he's trying to make sure he doesn't leave any babies out there, and he's trying to explain all these things, you know, like, well, you went out drinking with us, yeah, but I only had a Coke.
Right.
And you might have thought I was really drinking, but I wasn't.
Exactly. So it was like he was saying that I wasn't really lying. I was
right. And
then give you all the information.
Yeah.
Mm.
He is. I mean, it was just hilarious because it's things that so many Muslims, whether they're in the workforce, they're in various educational settings, they don't drink, but you will get ridden to death if people think you're not drinking.
Yeah.
Right? So he came back with some stuff about, well, I'm the designated driver. This and I'm that. But then the other part was the undressing of the sexual mores among both Muslim men and women.
Yes. That was a theme throughout the show. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I haven't watched all of it. And he said, no, we're just like all the, essentially what he was saying was, we're like all the rest of the men, but with a little twist.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to be remiss in not having protection because we don't want any babies out there. But then the Jewish girl is saying, well, yeah, we'll take care of it. And he said, well, how are you going to take care of it when you don't know what it is, right? So there is some moral core sitting back there somewhere.
I think that's an absolutely important point.
When you move to the second episode, he thinks he's going to find Islam in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets to Egypt and everybody's getting high. And now he's getting jumped on from another point of view. You don't get high. You don't smoke no dope. You don't snort no cocaine. And it's, oh my God, you're from New York, dude. So
that's a real interesting thing because that's something we experience in terms of going back, and you have this idealized idea about back home.
Yeah.
You know, whether it be Egypt or Palestine or Pakistan,
wherever
it is, you think you're going back to this idealized place where you'll really find yourself and you can connect to.
Well, what is that all about?
I think, well, I kind of have had a similar experience. And I know a lot of people who first generation have had that experience. It comes from, just finding yourself, coming of age, here, becoming comfortable in your own skin. And when you're here, growing up in the 90s, things that helped solidify my identity were hip hop, were, seeing that Islam is a part of the conversation in popular culture,
Right.
not that it is a foreign thing, and being involved in that myself to some extent, not in creating music, but like graffiti, so those elements really helped me, but I don't think that exists to the same degree that it existed in the 90s today. So people,
Say more on that particular point.
so on that particular point, what I see is a difference in that today, a lot of what the young people, and now I'm generalizing, is the way they come to a reconciliation with their varying identities is through embracing Islam as an identity, but as an identity that is an ethnicity, like we mentioned earlier. It's almost devoid of a spiritual core, or it's explained in a way that is extremely new. And I know I need to.
Right. No, I think because you don't see anything spiritual. What you see are rules and regulations. Can't do this, can't do that, can't do the other, can't do, the third thing. Or, oh, it's just so new, we don't know what to make of it. When it's not new in this country.
Yeah. Or on the flip side, it's also like, I'm Muslim, but zina is okay. I'm Muslim, but, so those are the extremes that I see with the youth. And then, but growing up in the 90s, the situation I feel was different because of what popular culture was like back then. It was different. Even though Muslims were, in some sense, not as visible in terms of how it became after 9/11, it was still there as a subculture, and it was very strong. And you had the movie Malcolm X, which I mentioned, and then you had the motifs and ideas of Islam throughout the music and the hip hop culture. And a lot of people I knew back then in the 90s who came to Islam or who awakened to the practice of Islam, it happened through reading the autobiography of Malcolm X.
I see.
Was central. So those are some of the difference that I see between then and today.
Okay, so let's move on last, but certainly not least, to Mr. Chappelle.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
What do you think?
I think he's the greatest comedian alive. I think he absolutely, and I love how he is able to so brilliantly weave, the critique of the sacred cows, but also, his knowledge of his history and,
awesome.
is awesome, and the nuances he's able to provide, and not being controlled, being free in his expression, because he took a lot of heat for his last stand-up, and people trying to cancel him. And I just love the way he is able to do that. And to me, I think he should inspire Muslim artists in the sense that he's not controlled and he's not, someone who is beholden. He's free to create his art, but he had to go through a process.
Yeah. Very true.
And the thing is, not many people are built for that, and not everyone is going to go that way, I understand.
So why don't you talk a little bit about the process as you read that Chappelle went through to be able to be this free artist?
Well, he started in the business of comedy at a very young age. I think he was under 16 when he first started doing his stand-up. And he quickly evolved because he had that, latent, talent in him, and it was just developed in the iron and the heat of being on the stage and bombing, and then so forth and so on. Then he got into the business. He also has like these amazing parents he's spoken of many times who were college professors and intellectuals who schooled him on all of this. And he went to the Duke Ellington School of the Arts in DC, which I think had a tremendous effect on his growth. And so he knew the business in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And there were times where they wanted him to sell out in the past to wear a dress.
Right.
You know, he brings this point about how he's been asked to wear a dress numerous times.
Yeah.
By people in Hollywood. And
that's the thing, you know, if you notice, looking at it's art in general, but especially for some, it's you got to go in drag or you haven't arrived.
Yeah, and it's very strange. And it is also, it's happened with other Black actors, male actors, where it's an attempt to emasculate.
Yes.
I think he's mentioned that as well. And so, you know, he kind of was forged through all of that. And he had the most successful show in America at the time, Chappelle's Show, which I absolutely loved, and you know all my friends loved. People, sadly, today probably many of the young people probably don't know about it.
Yeah.
But they offered him $50 million, but the price it seemed was he had to sacrifice some creative control, and he didn't want to bend on that. And the reaction to when he went to Africa and left the $50 million, to being called a crackhead and an insane person. And that is a lesson that you have to be prepared and you have to have the fortitude to weather. And he jokes about it all the time, like, oh, I can't believe it. And my wife gets so upset that I left that $50 million, you know. But he self-deprecates, but he still is, you know, on that point about, I did it my way.
Yeah.
You know?
But, you know, so here we have these three people. One who is fornicating all over the place. And, well, he's still fornicating, even though one woman who engages him, she's committing adultery. Then you have Chappelle, who is in the hood, but with such insight, it doesn't matter what culture you're from, you get it.
Yeah.
And we have in the middle, Mr. I'm not quite sure, I haven't landed Hassan Minhaj, you know, where he does wonderful social commentary. But then will trip. That's the only thing I can think. I got to increase my vocabulary here. He'll trip off into making fun of something that people are still, those who are believers, those who are not believers still know that it is a part of Muslim prayer in a way through tone, predominantly, that makes you jerk your head back and say, what did he just do? What did he just say?
Yeah.
And you can hear what he just said, but it's how he said it.
It's how
with Keith Ellison, who is our the Attorney General, I think, in Minnesota, who's dealing with awesome set of circumstances. And Keith got ridden when he was in Congress for being Muslim. They wouldn't let him be the chair of the DNC, primarily because he was being Muslim, and he's doing it with him. So visually, it says a lot. But I think that your ideas and talks about representation, ideas, and at what cost representation, and who are you representing? Say something about that.
Absolutely. So that's what I was going to say is, you know, I had this conversation with my friend and he said, I'm cool with representation as long as it's us. And to me, representation is not everything. You know, for all these examples that we've been speaking about today, Hassan Minhaj, Rami, Chappelle, we all have examples in these, right? And then we're talking about the different fault lines that come up with that, right? Between the communities, the interethnic, the different gazes that are upon them and the cold hard facts that they have to face when it comes to being in Hollywood, representation is not everything, because at the end of the day, you may do more harm.
Yeah.
You know, and everyone has the right and the ability to create art. And I'm not here to police or censor anyone. I'm just here to give my opinion. You know, but I see how it has an effect, and I'm not sure that it's always positive. Um, and there's a lot of questions when it comes to what Muslim means. What is the Muslim here when it comes to Hollywood and media and representation? You know, we have, and is it true to say the Muslim is an ethnic, cultural,
Right.
you know, and are these people the representatives of what it means to be Muslim? Because oftentimes they just feed into a liberal dogma.
Right. Well, that might be it, but that's something, and I'm going to have you back on, I think, with some other people who are looking at the same things. You know, also on Netflix, there's a series on ultra-Orthodox Judaism, one of which is called, what is it?
Believers?
No, the ultra-Orthodox or the Orthodox or something. It's a story. And the undressing of that community, the Hasidim, is much in the same way. And I'm sure that a lot, because they go into what is happening at weddings, what happens on the wedding night, what happens if you're not sexually satisfied. All of the things that if I put all three of these dudes together are in that movie. But it was done in concert with the community.
No, I think it's excellent to have a comparative analysis of and look at how the Hasidim Orthodox are presented and represented, and how actually when we talk about Jews in Hollywood, it's usually like a reform and very liberal kind of wing, which I guess is the majority of Jews in America. But is that the case with Muslims? See, most of the Muslims you see on television and represented are the Kumail Nanjianis and the Hassan Minhajs.
Right.
Whereas the community, that doesn't really a representative of the community.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we are, of course, over time. I've had a ball. I'm going to make you smile some more as I take you into the depths of stuff when I see you next time.
Well, thank you for taking me into the rabbit hole today.
That's great.
Dr. Udine, you gave me a lot to think about.
Good. And you will write about it. This is Professor Aldine with Critical Talk. I've had the honor of talking with Muhammad Tausif Akbar, and we'll talk to him again very shortly. Have no fear.
Thank you.